Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Look at all those beautiful books behind you.
Those are my friends.
Hi,
Lovely.
Kate. I'm Emily.
Hi, Emily.
I'm
You
Chris.
gotta move your
Oop.
Hi, Chris. It's wonderful to meet you guys. I have to tell you that first of all, I asked my friend Whitney Share like what she had done when she was promoting her book. She said, "Oh, you got to do book Cougars. Those are my absolute favorite people ever."
Aw.
Oh, that's so
And then
nice.
Jenna Blum wanted me to say hi if it was appropriate.
Oh, hi,
Oh,
Jenna.
hi,
Of
Jenna.
course. Yes.
Yeah, you're so lucky to be up with that Boston crew. We have Green Eye Envy.
It's pretty awesome. I lived in Salt Lake for almost 30 years, and we had a pretty good literary community there. I was good friends with Betsy Burton, who owned the King's English bookstore. You know Betsy?
Yeah, I've been
And
there to that
Mhm.
bookstore. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
isn't it
Yeah.
wonderful? So, I really felt like I had a great literary community there, and I'm originally from Boston. I thought when I moved back here, gosh, where am I going to find my writing community? I found it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's
Good.
very cool. That fear is real. I moved from Chicago and I was thinking like, why am I moving from Chicago to Connecticut? Like, where am I going to find the book events and the book people? Well, that situation's been solved very
Yeah,
quickly. Yes.
yeah. So where in Connecticut are you?
We're in Guilford, Connecticut, which is just outside of New Haven.
Okay, yep. We take the train in New York, so
Yeah.
All
that's
right.
how I know Gilbert.
Yes. You go
Yeah.
through our tracks for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
How fun. I know we don't, whenever we go up to Boston, we always drive, but we've talked about taking the train because we definitely train when we go to New York. But
yeah,
Boston, for some reason, seems easier to drive into. So we do that.
depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you're
Right.
going,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
But I married a man who has not outgrown his train stage, so
Nice.
It's a very civilized way to travel. It is
it
part of why
really
I
is.
moved out here because I wanted
Mhm.
public transportation and I
Yeah.
lived where there was none.
Which
So,
was where?
Ohio.
Oh,
Yeah.
whereabouts?
Yellow Springs, home of
Okay, yeah,
Conneaut College. Yeah,
Mhm.
very small town,
yeah.
a public transportation desert.
It
So,
is. It is. Yeah,
well, we're so glad to have you here today, and especially during Pub Week.
thank
Yes.
Congratulations.
you,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, we had a great time last night. We had a great turnout, despite the fact that the weather was just foul. But that it was great. We had, by some estimates, close to 100 people.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. The bookstore, Porter Square Books, told me it was their largest event yet in their new location, where they've only been about, oh, maybe 6 months. But still, that was pretty awesome for a
Yeah.
Absolutely.
completely unknown author.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Congrats. What a fun time.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I think we're going to get official now, even though we've
No.
already started talking, or should we just keep talking?
Well,
Hi, everyone. It's the Book Cougars, two middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read. I'm Emily,
and I'm Chris, and we are joined by a very special guest today.
It would be me, Kate Woodworth.
and we're so excited because Kate has taken the time to talk to us during Pub Week. Her book, Little Great Island, just published this week. It's a novel, it's climate fiction. I read it and loved it. And we would love for you to tell. I mean, I could give a brief summary, but usually the author does a better job. So let's let you do it, Kate. Take it away.
Oh, I wish you would do it. I always think other people do a great job. I'm so close to it. But Little Great Island is actually told in 12 different points of view, which people find a little terrifying. But let me just say, I worked very hard to make sure that worked seamlessly. And the two primary points of view are Mary McGavin and Harry Richardson. Mari is a young woman who was born and raised on Little Great Island. And at the beginning of the book, she is returning home after a 10-year absence, after having had to flee from the cult where she has been for the past 10 years. She has her 6-year-old son with her. And also on the same ferry to the island is Harry Richardson. Harry is a lifelong summer visitor to the island, and he's returning to sell the family's summer home. It's on the land directly adjacent to the McGavin family's property, and he wants to sell it because it just contains too many memories of his recently deceased wife, Ellie. So it's the dynamic between the two of them and what happens with that land that actually sets off the whole chain of events that make up the plot of the novel.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about what was the spark for this novel?
Interestingly, it came from 2 places. One was definitely an intention not to be writing a novel. I had written a number of novels, I had been in workshops, I'd gotten my MFA, and I really just kind of wanted a break from having to think about plot points and protagonists and antagonists and all of those things. So I was just indulging in really writerly play, which involved writing some vignettes and character sketches that all took place on an island. It's a real island in my mind. It's a place that holds a lot of very special memories for me. And at the same time, in a completely different area of my brain, I was really concerned about climate change. And what that looked like for me was a lot of complaining about how nobody was doing anything. And then I had one of those moments where it's like, "Oh, crud, I'm not really doing anything either." And I was doing the basic things. We were recycling, and I was using my cloth bags when I went food shopping and all of those good things, but I really didn't feel I was making a difference. And those 2 things kinda came together in what I call like a big bang moment of like, "Okay, the thing I could do is the thing I already do and love doing, and that is write a novel that really has as its backdrop climate change." It made good sense for an island off the coast of Maine because the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than pretty much any other body of water on the planet. And those islands are really experiencing a lot of the things that we're all going to be experiencing in terms of more severe storms, higher tides, and really sort of destruction all along the shoreline there, which is impacting the fisheries. In addition to which, that warming, there have been so many lobsters for the past, really since kind of the 70s. But now that the lobster population is starting to drop off, there's been a lot of controversy about what exactly is causing that. But just recently, I'm starting to see reliable sources definitively saying it's because the water is getting too warm and the lobsters are heading to Canada.
That's what they say here in Connecticut too. We used to have lobsters here in Connecticut, and now pretty much all the lobster stuff you get along the shoreline here is from Maine or Canada.
Yeah.
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 Well, Kate, one of the interesting things I think also about the novel is, well, there's many interesting things, but the tension between the year-long residents and the summer residents. So the year-long residents, in large part, are the ones that are fishing or trying to do things to keep themselves alive. They're not just there, to have fun in the sun in the summer, but also an island where there's limited ability for growth. And so the idea that this family wants to sell their family homestead and what the developers want to do with it, which can also impact climate change. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, the dynamic between those 2 populations, I think it's definitely there for any island you can think of where the climate is conducive to people coming to visit, but also in a number of other places that aren't islands. Certainly Cape Cod, it's that kind of thing. And that dynamic has always really interested me because it's really a very symbiotic relationship. The people who come in the summer absolutely need those people who are there year round to maintain the infrastructure, to caretake their homes during the off season, to feed them and take care of their kids during the summer season. And I really didn't want the dynamic to be just between those 2 parties. That seemed a little simplistic, and I also one of the things that comes up in the book a fair amount is this idea of life in the gray. I did not want this to be black and white. So thinking about what it is that Harry wants with this property, well, basically he just wants to sell it quickly. And I had to try and come up with something that was realistic because if you were actually on the mainland and you could subdivide the amount of property you had and put up a bunch of McMansions, okay. When you're on an island that's 12 miles off the coast where the Wi-Fi is a little funky and the ferry service is sort of dependent on this, that, or the other, that's a different scenario. So and I did used to I worked at Stein Eriksen Lodge in Deer Valley. And so I started thinking, what would happen if it was a really nice kind of corporate retreat place where the intention was that nobody was going to stay for very long, but they would be in a beautiful, secluded place and they would have all these opportunities to see like the real Maine. But of course, by virtue of them being there, the real Maine is going to start to change. And that's where that ripple effect into the gray area really started to come into the forefront because some of the people who live on the island were in favor of this. Because, particularly as the lobster population went away, it gave them a new opportunity for income. But it also was going to put them decidedly into the service class and was going to have an impact on the whole character of the island. So that was the dynamic that really interested me.
Oh, that's really cool. I worked in a town here along the Connecticut shoreline called Old Saybrook, and that is a town that swells a lot during the summer. There's a lot of old money there. And the saying at the store where I worked was summer people, summer not.
I've never heard that. I like that a lot.
But I'm so fascinated that I mean, how did the idea of having it be a corporate space come to be? Was that another flash or were you drafting and
That
did it?
was a lot of hard work. And one of the things that I went through in this book, which was interesting, was I spent a lot of time trying to like asking other people, like, tell me what's supposed to happen now, because I kept hitting a wall.
Mm.
And I finally recognized I was the one who had to figure it out. And so my process for that is usually just a lot of journaling. And again, I had worked in a very high-end hotel and was familiar with this whole idea of a corporate retreat. And I thought, well, okay, I think that makes sense. And there really are. We had been to Iceland. There are places like that in Iceland. So they do exist.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So you talked about that the book is written from multiple points of view. How did you decide to write from the island's point of view? I thought that was so fascinating.
Interestingly, that the island's point of view, the very beginning, that first piece from the island's point of view was one of the first bits that I wrote. And I told you I was writing vignettes. And in that one, I just really I love language. And I just wanted to indulge in my love of language. And when the two ideas kind of came together, well, I didn't want to throw that part out because I really liked it. Um, and so then I kind of had to go through and figure out how it works. To me, it's actually more than the island's point of view. It's really the web of life and not just human life. It includes all of the living things on the island, which I think is really important for us humans to take into consideration when we're thinking about climate change. One of the last sections I wrote in the book is one of those omniscient bits called Shell Dirt History. And that was one of those ones I realized as I was sort of mapping this whole thing out that I was missing one, just in terms of trying to make the flow work. And I thought, crud, how do I write something that doesn't stick out like a sore thumb? And about that time, I was starting to become more aware of some of the social justice aspects of climate change. And I thought, okay, I need to look at that. And I need to look at the past. And I need to look at the present. And I need to be alluding to the future. And I didn't really have the past in the book. So that shelter history chapter gave me the opportunity to do that.
Wow. So you wrote the book so that you felt like you were doing something to help, but you didn't just do that. You also created a whole project.
I did create a whole project. I had actually never heard of climate fiction when I started writing this book. And once I found out about it, I figured I should actually do some learning here, read other books by climate writers and learn a little bit more about kind of the purpose of climate fiction because I really did want to write this to have people like think about it and do something about it. And when climate fiction first started to become really popular, which was maybe 10, 12 years ago, the hope was that actually it would lead to action on the climate. Enough time had passed that I could see that that wasn't the case. But then a study came out that actually somebody did some research and determined that no, it is not the case, and that that empathetic response only lasts for a couple of days. Good news, bad news, right? Because I thought, now we have a couple of days. And I thought, what would happen if I put a call to action in the book so that it's actually right there? And so that is where I came up with the Be the Butterfly campaign, which is a reference to the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect does come up thematically within the book a few times. And I pitched this idea to my publisher, and she said, "That's great. We absolutely will put that explanation in the back of the book." And she said, "Come up with 12 nonprofits, and we'll put them there too." Because part of what I was doing was asking people, like, now you finished writing the book, do something to help the environment. Everybody, I don't care what you do, but do something. And so we thought, okay, we'll put these nonprofits in and people can support the nonprofits. Well, I thought about it for a couple of days and I thought, why is it up to me? Like, I'm actually coming to this party kind of late. And I thought, I'm going to ask all these other climate writers who have been doing this for a number of years, much more involved, know so much more. I'm going to ask them to give me suggestions for nonprofits. So I started reaching out to people absolutely out of the blue. And I was so touched by the responses I got. Peter Heller, Bill McKibben, Barbara Kingsolver, Lydia Millett. I mean, these are big names in climate writing. And so we've included their names and their nonprofits. And then things kept growing. And I thought, okay, it's one thing to read the book and find out about this, but I want to be out there talking to people. And I want to invite the people in the audience to do something to save the planet. And when I'm in any location that's not sort of directly in my town, there are different concerns about what's happening with the climate. It's different in Connecticut than it is in Boston. It's different in Boston than it is in Maine. And I thought, I write fiction. I'm not qualified to talk to people and answer some of their concerns. So I thought, I'm going to get other people who are more experts in this issue than I am to come join me. So, and a number of my events that I'm doing across the country at this point, I have invited other climate writers or members of nonprofits or government officials or academics to come and speak with me and to be available so that we can actually all really have a conversation about what's going on.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll put a link below to your tour dates. You definitely are all over the country, and like from now until I think September, and probably beyond.
Yeah, even beyond at this
Uh,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great project, Kate. Thank you,
Well, thank you. I mean, it was last night was the first time that we did this kind of ceremony where I have what I call commitment cards, and they're distributed to everybody at the events, and it says, "We invite you to commit to doing one small thing to help mitigate climate change." And then I'm just asking people for their first name and their town and their state. And I think we had probably close to 100 people there last night, and about 40 people filled out the cards. And it was just so much fun to see
yeah,
what people said.
yeah, yeah. It's like crowdsourcing. It's a really
Yep.
great idea.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
butterfly effect.
Yes.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
trying to get a lot of butterflies going
Yes.
on at
Yeah,
once.
right.
We
Yeah.
need it. We need it. We wanted to ask you about your publisher also, Sibiline Press.
Mhm.
They specifically publish women over 50.
Yes, they do.
What was your
So
experience working with them?
it's been really extraordinary. Interestingly, I don't actually remember submitting to them. I had been submitting the manuscript for well over a year, and to kind of the major go the whole literary agent, big five kind of thing. And a friend of mine had suggested that I start submitting to independent presses. I'd kind of given up hope. So I was just sending things out. And I was sitting in a parking lot and I got a text from the Sibiline editor, Julia Park Tracy. And she was referring to a blurb that was on my first book, which came out in 1989, by an author by the name of Ron Hansen. Ron Hansen wrote The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, which was made into a movie. And so most people know that book when they think of him. She said, "Is that the Ron Hansen who wrote Marriott in Ecstasy?" That was my favorite book by Ron Hansen. And I was like, oh, I just found my publisher.
Wow. That's a
Great.
great story.
There's so many things to love about the way they do business. We have the authors who publish through Sibiline, we are sisters. And on the spring list, the spring 2025 list, we started meeting monthly by Zoom, exchanging information, asking each other questions, which was great because all of us are of a certain age. Some of us, most of us, are actually in our 70s. And to have somebody who was in their 50s who could kind of explain the whole social media thing to us. And then as we started to launch, we're there for a cheering section for each other. We're there to really help each other about trying to understand, like, what do I need to do about this? So that part has been absolutely precious to me.
Very cool. That is just so refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad it worked out for you. Who needs the big five when you can have support from, a coven of women?
I mean, I kept saying, the big five are going to implode because someone's going to realize that there are all these other great books out there that aren't getting published. But I didn't think it would happen in my lifetime. So it's just been such a thrill to watch that happen and see how many indie presses there are. And I just was learning last week about the whole concept of the mission-driven publisher. There are publishers now that are specifically looking for books on climate change and the environment.
Mhm.
Yay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, Kate, we wanted to talk with you about what you're currently reading. We do these Friday Reads videos, and so we thought we'd each share one book.
And I
Would
get to go first?
well,
Sure.
yeah,
Unless you
and
unless you want to break from talking and then one
yeah.
of us can go first.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, you can see why I would have a problem with one book. Um, So I kind of I did narrow it down to two. I was briefly up to three there, but I recently read The Light Pirate, which is a couple of years old. And Lily Brooks Dalton is one of the author butterflies, um, who has suggested a nonprofit. And the writing is just luminous. And that book, it's about really the kind of saying goodbye to Florida as climate change really takes it to where it's no longer habitable by most people. Sounds depressing. It actually, she has a beautiful message of hope in there. So she's really my hero. After reading some, I don't know, 25 climate fiction books, I decided it was time for a little break. I will always read everything Kate Atkinson writes, and the Jackson Brodie books they're just fun, they're relaxing, they're a good read.
Great. I have been wanting to dip into those. Thanks for reminding us about that.
Yeah,
And we should also say that we're going to put all the information about your butterfly project down below. So,
we'll link
Thank you.
yeah, we
everything.
will link
Yeah,
it so people can see how they can be involved.
yeah.
And you'll put the butterfly authors and their nonprofits, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was going to hold this one up, but this one, I already read this one. It has such a great cover, I have to say. I love the cover so much.
Take it.
You know who found that cover? It was Jenna Blum.
Oh, really?
Jenna spent like literally 30 seconds on the internet just flipping through, and she goes, "There, that's your cover."
Oh,
And I was like, no, it's not. You'd have to take more time than that." So I went home and I looked it up again, and I love it. And the artist is from Maine. And I thought, what could be better than that?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I contacted the artist, William Hallett, and I said, "Would you be open to the idea of us using one of your paintings on the cover?" And he said, "Yes."
Mm.
So I put him in touch with my publisher, and within 24 hours, I had 5 different possibilities based on his paintings, and all of
Wow.
them were spectacular.
Wow.
That's
So,
Great.
talk about the joy of working with Sibiline. That was not my
Yeah.
experience with the cover of my first book, which came out from Dutton.
Wow.
wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it.
I do too.
Well, I'm dipping into The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. Talk about covers. I love this
Yeah.
cover. This is an epistolary novel. It's about a woman who's retired. She was a lawyer, and now she's spending time every day after she gets some of her, morning routine down and some of her chores done, corresponding, literally writing letters to people. Some people she knows, some people she doesn't know, to a couple authors like Larry McMurtry and somebody else, I can't remember, telling them what she thought of their books. And it just sounds like a delight to me. And she's also writing to somebody that's a mystery or that she doesn't ever want to. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Someone that the letters she'll never actually send. So that's a
Mm,
thread in the novel as well. So the
that sounds
correspondent.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to start reading this weekend a book called The Belgian Girls. This is by Catherine J. Atwood. And I have read, this is her first fiction book, I should say, and it's kind of like geared toward a YA audience from what I understand, but I've some adults have been reviewing it and really speaking highly of it. I've read some books by Catherine. She's written kind of a series of really fantastic books that are biographies of women in World War One, then World War Two. I think there were 2 volumes of World War Two, and then the Vietnam War.
Wow.
And so, and those are geared also towards a young adult audience, these short biographies that are just really fantastic and highlight what women have done. And so now she is going for some fiction here. And this is a dual timeline story of a woman in World War One in Brussels. In Brussels, yes. And she's a spy, I believe. And
Mm.
then at World War Two. And Catherine's been really doing a good job posting on social media um, just about different aspects of the book. And she talked recently about the cover of the book and how these soldiers marching, you see a Nazi here and then a World War One soldier, were kind of taken from a photograph of soldiers. I think it was in World War Two. So that's kind of reflecting a real photograph. And
Yeah.
that's these 2 women across 2 different timelines looking at one another. So really excited about this. And Catherine is another writer who is of a certain age. So I'm really excited to dip into this one this weekend. The Belgian Girls just out now.
That's great.
Yeah. I've got some.
I have one more because
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
I'm spending some time in bookstores these days. I just discovered
oh.
this, which I haven't read. Have you guys read this?
Emily kind of
I
did.
DNF'd it. I couldn't do it. But it's on every awards list. And Kate, I'm an incredibly responsible person, like to a fault sometimes. And part of the thread of that novel is just someone who's like she's heading somewhere to do something for work. I'm also a Capricorn, so it's like, if
Mhm.
you're heading somewhere for work, you're gonna go. And she doesn't get very far and then ends up, like kind of having derailing in what she would consider a positive way. To me, it was very stressful. It was what I call a butt clencher for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's not, there's also a lot of sex in it. And so I think some people are uncomfortable with that. That wasn't the part that made me uncomfortable. It was the like not being responsible to your family and to your
Yeah.
work. That was hard for
That's,
me. Yeah.
yeah.
People love it though. They absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for the warning.
yeah.
I was like, I haven't heard of this book. I
Well,
should read
Kate,
this book.
now we need to know
Yes.
when you do get around to it, please let us know.
I will, definitely.
And I'm also, I just have to say, because I'm nosy, I'm very curious about your hand weights in the back on your bookshelf.
Oh,
Is that for your bone density? Or you like,
yes, it is. Yes,
yeah,
it is.
for you.
Um, I had right at the beginning of sort of ramping up for the book tour, I had my wellness check and told my doctor, okay, things are going to be a little busy for a while and intense. And she said, well, the number one thing I want you to do is to keep using some upper body weights to keep your bone density up. So every day I do that. And then I'm doing Duolingo and I have a like 2,200 day streak.
Wow.
And I don't dare miss a day now. I do not want to break that streak. So somehow getting my weights and my French in the middle of everything else, that's kind of been the cornerstone of my day.
Oh, good for
Excellent. So
you.
how are your French language skills? Would you mind saying something to us in French?
I probably would mind, but here's the reason why. I took French for about 5 years in high school. So I thought I was pretty good. I mean, I got a good grade and all those good things. And then I went out into the world. And in my career, I was a medical writer and I worked in an academic medical center, specifically the University of Utah, where they did that first artificial heart implant. Um, and so I was in the public relations office. So we're up all night answering phone calls from all over the world about how the patient is doing. And at about 10 o'clock at night, someone said, does anybody speak French? I do. And they said, okay, you're going to be on, this radio station live in
Oh my gosh.
at about
I'm getting
5:40
sweaty.
tomorrow morning.
Oh my God.
I didn't sleep that night.
Oh
And I
man.
figured, how bad could it be? I mean, there are only some things we were allowed to say. What I hadn't noticed is they didn't teach you a lot of medical language in high school French. So they do the countdown and they say you're live, and this whole stream of French comes at me. And there's this long pause. And then I hear this English voice saying, just say something and we'll make it make sense. Even though I now have studied French for a while, I don't think I will ever speak French in public.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a life-altering
That's
experience.
intense.
I totally understand that.
Yes.
International shame. It was good.
Oh my God.
That's
Do you
intense.
have nightmares
Whew.
about that?
Yeah.
I would have nightmares about
So
that.
I withdraw
Just
my question. Well, we just asked because we recently spoke with Matthew Goodman, whose latest book is set in dealing with Nazi Germany. But did some original research in French. He speaks and reads French, and we both have envy over that.
Yeah.
Just to be fluent in that way, I think is really opened so many doors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yay for you
My
for
my
working on
father
it.
was actually he was bilingual, and even toward the end of his life, he was trying to pick up Spanish, and he would sit there and he would read books in foreign languages. And it really wasn't until recently I thought, I wonder if he had any idea what the book was about. Um,
Or he's just letting the words run over him. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, my daughter's fluent in Spanish, but a lot of how she learned was actually studying abroad and watching telenovelas with her
Mhm.
host family.
Yeah,
And then she read all the Harry Potters in Spanish,
yeah.
but she'd read them in English. So I think that helps, so
Mhm.
you can skip some words if you don't know them because you know the story already.
Right, yeah.
But
See,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
my mom's from Germany and she learned English by watching soap operas, reading comic books. But she has said too, I mean, she's been in the United States since the 60s. And but there are a lot of words now that she doesn't know in German, technical words, a lot of the internet related words and things like that. So can imagine. Same thing with medical words.
Yes, I can only
Yeah.
imagine.
They're hard enough in English.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
right.
right. That's right. People who know medical terms do very well in trivia, though, I've learned playing with doctor friends of mine. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, we love your novel. And just to bring it back to climate change, I did see a big headline this week about the Great Salt Lake and how it's drying up, and they're
Yep,
not sure if they can reverse it. And I know you spent a lot of time in Salt Lake City, and maybe you're even going there on book tour. Are you?
I
Yes.
Nice. So thank you so much for your time and attention to what's happening in the real world and letting us dip into a little fictional world to digest that, because I think it is a really good way to understand it. And then giving some options.
thank you.
Well,
Yeah, I really wanted to make sure that the book included hope. And that was probably the biggest challenge for me because certainly there are days, more so recently, when I don't have a lot of hope for the climate. But, and I hope this is not too much of a spoiler, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I have hope for us as human beings. I think it was Al Gore who said, we're better than this. And we are. I know we are. I think it's just a matter of digging deep and not in an uncomfortable way, but just saying, okay, maybe I don't need that right now, or maybe I am going to today, this week, every day, say, this is the one small thing I'm going to do to help mitigate climate change.
well said.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Kate.
Kate.
Thank you. It's great to meet you.